Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to episode 5 of the Woke Mommy Chatter podcast. Education is one of those areas I've developed a real interest in since having kids. People like to spout theories about school not mattering and degrees being useless, but the truth is that is only true for a privileged few. If you are Black and you expect your children to succeed in life, they have to have an education. But for Black kids, getting that education is not easy. Whether you're in Canada or in America, the statistics are grim for Black students, and that's why homeschooling is increasing amongst both African American and Canadian Black families. On this episode of Woke Mommy Chatter, we are talking homeschooling, the why, the how, and the real. I'm joined by Eva Greene Wilson, a homeschooling mom and socamom.com blogger, and Yolanda Newton, who is also a homeschooling mom and director at educationrevolt.org. Eva and Yolanda, thank you so much for joining me. So Eva Greene Wilson, you're a homeschooling mom, you're author of the socamom.com blog, and Yolanda, you're also a homeschooling mom and director at educationrevolt.org. I love that name. So we'll get to that in a minute. Eva, can you tell me, I can barely get my kids to sit down and do 5 pages of Kumon. And I just, can you tell me a little bit about your homeschooling journey and how it began?
Well, my children started off in just regular school. I was the parent that could not wait until it was time for everybody to start school, because that meant that I was going to go back to work. And, I'm not necessarily the mom that sits on the floor and plays Legos and makes puzzles and that kind of thing. I'm kind of cerebral. We talk about things. That's just about it. And then eventually they need to go to school. So they all went, and my youngest went early. They, the people at the school, they met her and they said, oh, she's so cute. It would be cool if she could come. She could just be in the kindergarten class and just be there and put on a uniform and be cute. And I said, well, you know what? That's perfectly fine with me. Her brother was going to be in the same class. They're 11 months apart. And she went at 3. And about a month in, we found that she was accelerating really, really quickly, and she was going a little further past where her emotional maturity could manage being, taking in all the information, being with all the other kids and all that type of thing. But she was learning absolutely everything and going just really, really fast. So the next year that she made it through the school year, and at the end of the year they wanted to put her in like a 3rd or 4th grade class, and I said, I don't think at 4 that's a great idea. So she came home again. The boys continued to go to school, and she came home, and she's very she does her thing kind of on her own. So she went into a room at our office and did her work, and I was in my room doing what I did, and it was perfect.
So we should say your daughter is she's a child genius, right? Like, she was featured on the Lifetime Child Genius show. That's right.
She was on there. She ain't win another. I'm just kidding. But she was on there. She's I think every kid is gifted in their own way, and she's very good at certain things. She's very motivated, and she's a self-starter. So if you have any kid that will pick up a book and kind of do their own thing and ask questions, they can do anything. When you have a kid that will focus like that. So her gift is more focused than anything else. So she was able to, for me, she was like the homeschool kid. That's what you want. Because everywhere she is a classroom.
Right.
She's kind of detailed and stuff like that. And the boys, they like school, so they stayed there until it made sense for them to come and kind of hang with us.
So are all 3 of your kids homeschooled now then?
Well, the oldest just left for college and in August. So now it's just the 2 of them.
Wow.
And the 2, they're, how old are they? 11 and 12.
So Yolanda, what's your homeschooling journey been like? Why did you decide to homeschool your kids?
Well, with me, I actually was a teacher in the public school. I went to college, and my parents were like, you're just such a comforter, you're a nurturer, you're an educator, and I fought it all the way up until I graduated, and I said, fine, I'll try being a teacher, I'm not going to like it. And I walked into the school, and I absolutely loved it. But the longer that I was there, the more I loved the kids. but the more I saw kind of some issues and problems. But as I was there and I'm looking at it, got married, and me and my husband were talking about our kids, and he's like, oh, they can go to your school. And it was this instant gut reaction of, no, they can't, and he's like, why wouldn't you want your kids to go to the school? You love school. I'm like, I love school, and I'm there because I'm trying to do good, but you're asking me if I'm going to put my kids into that situation. So even before I had kids, I knew that their birth would signal the eventual end of me being in the public school system, that I would have to exit because I wasn't willing to put my kids there. So it was automatic. When I had my kids, that was the journey. I knew that they would be schooling with me at home. So with me doing that and starting and looking into the homeschool environment, I came in contact with a lot of other parents and, including some of my friends who wanted to homeschool. And some of them, before I even started with my own son with his homeschooling, approached me and said, oh, will you help? And so there was one girl that I picked up who I love. I'll just call her my little chocolate princess that I picked up. And she's in middle school, and she's gifted. My son is not. She is. And we'll talk about those labels. But I said, you know what? I will. I'll take her on. And I used that, and I started, and it was just natural. It was the best thing for me. It was just the easiest decision for me to make without even thinking about it.
So that's really interesting, because you were a teacher in the public school system, but you didn't want that for your kids. You didn't want to put them in that system.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. I couldn't do it. I looked at that system and saw so many areas where it was broken systemically that, I had a choice whether I was going to put my son in it and fight the system and risk not giving him the best, or decide to walk away. So I made the decision that was best for my own children.
So, if we look at the statistics, according to the National Center of Educational Statistics reports, their numbers say that since 2007, homeschooling has grown 17% when looking at the total number of kids homeschooled. And, there's also a jump amongst Black parents. Do you think that part of that is because the system is, I don't want to say broken, but needs a kind of boost?
Well, for me, broken is a harsh word, but there are some very systemic flaws with anyone who knows about education, looks at it on a national and an international point of view. There are some serious known identifiable flaws with the way that we choose to do mass public schooling in this country. And for me personally, saying it's like a pushback as if I'm saying that the system, like I'm telling the system to change. That's not necessarily true. I'm just saying that I choose not to be part of it. Because it's too much for my one person to change, and I have to focus on, for me, what's important, and that's my little princes and princesses. I need to focus on them.
So Eva, when your daughter is a bit of a, I guess, exceptional circumstance, because you really couldn't put her in a system that wasn't going to meet her needs. But when you decided to pull your two older boys out of school, what was that decision based on? Was that because of some of the flaws that you saw?
Well, they weren't in public school. They were in private school.
Okay.
And one of the things that I noticed, and I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't the same in public school, my kids are relatively quiet compared to a lot of other children. You'll have people say, my kids are so active and they talk in class. My kids are not those kids. So my son at one point was cutting his hair in the back of the classroom. He started off in the front of the class, and he was just really nice. He was a nice kid. He was a quiet kid, and they would put the kids who got in trouble closer to the front. Mm-hmm. So that meant that he didn't necessarily have to listen. He could do whatever he wanted in the back of that classroom as long as he was quiet and didn't disrupt anything. And he was getting grades back that didn't reflect what his standardized tests were saying. So that was one issue. My other son, he is a bit of a reluctant reader, not so much anymore, but he was. And again, he was a pleasant child and the teachers liked him, and all they were focused on, every note I got home was about him and snacks. And I'm like, I'm going to need him to read. Can we focus on that? Just like, you've got to put more in his lunch. I said, listen, I can't close the lunchbox as it is, number one. And number two, I need you to focus on what he's there for, because at this point, we're paying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this teacher had snacks under the table for him. When I went to pick him up, she had purchased her own snacks, because clearly that is what was important here. So, yeah, so we brought the two boys out. My son was in the 6th grade. He finished 6th grade in regular school, and my youngest son finished 1st grade. I want to say 1st grade. And then they came home. He came home for reading, and my oldest came home for math, pretty much.
The question I have for both of you is, what is the appeal? So I hear you're saying to me, there were some issues, but I mean, for a lot of parents, if you've got an issue with a teacher not paying attention to the right thing and focusing on snacks, for example, like, you kind of work with the school, you kind of, it's a drastic decision to pull your kid out and say, I'm going to stay home and I'm going to homeschool my child. So what was that? What made you decide that you were going to take that task on?
At that point, I had the time, because my husband and I had a business together, so we had the time and the space. The kids could come to the office with me. Like I said, they were relatively quiet. You give them their work, they do their work, and that's the end of that. As far as going to the school to have discussions, I did do that for both of them. We would go and we would have the discussion, but when they're in a school setting, they have your kids. If you add up the time and take out the part where they're sleeping, they have your kids more than you do. Yeah. So sometimes that conversation gets kind of funny. They're like, well, you only see her or him for 3 hours in the evening. I know your kid better than you do. And so you either take that or you do it yourself. And I know some parents don't necessarily have that option. Our situation was unique, but the frustration of trying to explain to somebody who has your kid physically more time out of the day than you do can be really, really difficult.
I think for me, the appeal was probably the flexibility and being able to really address the needs of each individual kid. Like, they're so unique and they're so different. First of all, like, right now I'm talking to you guys today, and if I was still in public school and my son was in public school, he would be somewhere probably stressed out right now, because school is the public school system is very institutionalized. They stand in little lines, they do things at certain times, and that's just the way it is. And developmentally, very young kids are not designed for that. So you're going to see that kickback and that stress of a kid who's like kindergarten age going, this is not for me, because developmentally, it's honestly probably not for them. Mm-hmm. And I'd probably be stressed too, because being a public school teacher, if they're doing it and they love it, they're stressed. I remember how stressed I was. And so, like Eva was saying, she she sees them at the end of the day, and for a couple of hours. I was seeing mine at the end of the day for a couple of hours, but then they would be stressed and I'm stressed. How is that any sort of enjoyable time as a family? So now we have this appeal where, like, now today we went on field trip, and he learned about flexible structures and rigid structures, and he did some engineering stuff, things he would have never done if he was in traditional school. Also, the kids they're all different levels. It's nice where we talk about kids and they're gifted, and I love that you said every kid is different. And my son's gift seems to be musically inclined and dancing inclined. That's his father's background. That seems to be what he picked up. That stuff would get him in trouble in public school, and it would, they get music maybe once every other, week or something like that in some sort of crazy wheel or rotation. Well, we have a music room in our house, and he has a drum kit, and I close the door, trust me, I close the door, but he can go and bang on that, and if he wants to come out and say, I want to be a musician, and that's my gift, and that's my talent, even though it may not be, lifted up or respected until kids are technically older, when kids have that sort of passion, you don't want to squash it even at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to let him flower in whatever environment that he wants to be in. And he went and did the engineering course, and he sat in the same room as my middle school princess, and both of them did it on their own levels, and it was okay. And I love seeing that. It was a great thing.
I love that, and I just, like, I get it. I understand the appeal of homeschooling, and because it is something I thought about. But as you're speaking, and particularly when you're homeschooling more than one kid, I just have this, like, I see myself in the corner, like, just slowly rocking, because I just don't know. How do you, what's your day like? Like, how do you manage 3 active kids who are going in all different directions and who are just very, I mean, these are kids who are, they want to learn, they're interested in learning. So how do you manage that as a mom? And it's not, I mean, sometimes what I found with my kids, I send them to Kumon because my daughter in particular she's a beautiful little girl and she's smart, but she is so stubborn. And when she was very little, when she was like 2 and 3, we'd be trying to teach her her phonics and the alphabet, and she wouldn't want to learn from us. So we'd say, this is the letter P. Look, what does P say? Puh, puh. And she'd be like, no, that's A. That is the letter A. It's A. And she functioned a lot better when it was someone other than one of her parents teaching her. So I don't, like, how do you, as a mom, separate, you know, being mom and being teacher?
I don't necessarily separate the two. It doesn't matter. My kids, like even the oldest, he's 18 now. I can say something to him today and he won't agree with me. But someone else can tell him the exact same thing, possibly word for word. And he'll be like, Mom, I just heard a piece of genius today. And you're like, wait, what? Yeah, wait. So, you know, that is not necessarily a barrier when it comes to homeschooling and drawing a line between I'm your mom and I'm your teacher.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much, I have something valuable to teach you and you need to get it. The same way that you need to eat this broccoli. It doesn't matter if you get it from, you're going to eat this broccoli. It is what it is. So if you have something valuable to give them and you happen to be the keeper of that valuable thing, they're going to have to get it from you. That's when you're homeschooling. They don't really have a whole lot of options because there's teachers that say they can't get through their students. There's teachers in school that say, you know, I've tried 7 different ways to teach them, you know, fractions, and they still don't seem to get it. So it's you know, it's just, you just got to work at it and see. And each kid, like she said, are completely different.
Yeah.
They're totally different. There's some that will catch everything you say and believe you over anybody else. And there's others that you have to really go through and prove yourself. You might have to pull out your degree if you have one. You might have to do Jeopardy in front of them to show that you know things. But I wouldn't say that that's a barrier to drawing that line.
I think for me, it's just, I have to have a lot of self-control and patience.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm dealing, especially with he's young, you know, but I also go, you know what, I have to remember, it's just him and me for that age group. If I put him in a room with a teacher who has 12 more, 13 more of him, is he going to get what he needs? Because he's driving me nuts. You know, like, in a room with just a bunch of them, and they're just bouncing, and they're bouncing. Like, he gets more from being at home with me, and his father. With us, my approach especially for that young age, is not necessary that we need to sit down and have this sort of extremely structured curriculum and do this. Some parents do that. And that may work for them. But because I don't believe it's developmentally appropriate for my son, he does do short amount of work. And you know, I'm traditionally trained to be an educator, so there's some things I bring to the table. But I also believe that at this age with him, a lot of that free playing, self-led playing leads to a lot of natural learning.
How old is your son now?
5. So that five-year-olds for me, they don't need to be sitting down, with a textbook, unless that is something that they can do, if that's who they are and they can do it, that's great. That's not mine, so 15, 20 minutes, and he makes me happy, and I make him happy, and he's super proud, and then he gets up, and I go and tell him, build a tower, and he can learn through doing it, hey, if I make the base a little bit wider, it'll stand a little bit longer. He learns that stuff himself, but even for him, honestly, a lot of it, at this point with him, is learning social skills, learning self-control. These are things that help students as they get older. So, if he can learn perseverance now and not giving up in the face of it's difficult, that's worth 10 times as much sit-down curriculum to learn 2 + 2 at his age. If he can get that, then when he faces something where I'm saying, okay, now we're going to do some real hard stuff, he has the will within him and who he is to know that he can push through it and he can do anything if he tries. And he tries and approaches it in different ways.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. That's so true. How do you, so for kids when they're that young and they're at home and they may just be with one parent or there might be another child there, how do you ensure that they are able to develop those social skills that they need?
Well, for me, even things like I said, like today, I never believe that when people say homeschool, home is for us, home is home base. Home is not where we are all the time. So he is very much around children of his age group, older children and adults, because I think that it's important for him to learn that. And, for backgrounds, just coming from the background that I am from and my husband, my son is a please, thank you, yes ma'am, no ma'am type boy. His shirt is tucked in. He combs his hair before he goes outside. He buttons up his shirt because that's the way that we're raising him, that he has to know, especially as a little black boy, you need to present yourself to the world in a certain way. So he learns all of those social skills by legitimate, actual social interaction. That boy is a social butterfly. Okay? He's a social butterfly. So for me, you need to take them out. If you want them to learn social skills, you have to make sure that they are socialized. And I make sure that he's socialized.
So Yolanda, you touched on the issue of race. And what I found interesting in the numbers that I had quoted at the beginning of our interview was that, numbers for black families homeschooling are up quite drastically. And I think, what do you think, Eva, what do you think the reason for that is? What's the benefit, particularly for kids of color, for kids, for Black children? What's the benefit to homeschooling?
One of the things that we've been able to do is talk about history in a way that includes our background. It's not something that they would necessarily get in school because everything is kind of American history focused, and then it's kind of skewed in a way, especially when the kids are younger, because they don't want it to offend anyone or make any of the other, especially if you're in a multicultural classroom, you don't want to upset anybody or make anybody feel singled out or anything like that. So with just us in our space having a conversation, we can talk about things frankly. So we did Native American history, and I remember when I was their age, Native American history was Thanksgiving and turkeys and corn, and you got to make a little cornucopia or something, and then you got to wear the outfit, and that was pretty much all. And that's all it was. But we were able to talk about DNA connections to China and all kinds of other things that the children were interested in. And prime example, we were discussing smallpox and the diseases. So in the history book, it just says there were certain diseases that the Europeans brought and this, that, and the third. So when we got down to it, they said, so smallpox, I said smallpox came in blankets and things like that. Okay. So how did they get syphilis? And I'm just sitting here like, Jesus. Those are the times that you wish it was somebody else that was having to have this conversation. And so you're able to say things to your kids in a way that you would want them. You're not sitting at home biting your nails saying, oh my gosh, what if the kids come across this? Well, how are they talking to my children about slavery? How are they talking to my kids about how African Americans influenced history? Are they giving them an accurate picture of what slavery was? Or are they calling it, workers, or comparing it to indentured servitude?
Yeah.
Even just recently, we watched videos and things like that, and one of the teachers on the video says that slaves were treated better than indentured servants. And I'm going, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm pretty confident that that's not, that wasn't the way that it worked. So you're able to, kind of monitor what they're reading, what they're learning, because you're not an encyclopedia. You're going to have to give them outside materials. But I'm able to tell my Black children how their, not necessarily ancestors, but their, how African people influenced all manner of history and science and things like that, something they may or may not get in traditional public school or private.
I definitely agree. And also for me, just because I was in the schools, the last school that I worked at was a good school, okay? But I was the only African American teacher at that school. And I mean, like, my husband says I'm like pro-Black, like I'm not moderate. It's the easiest way to say it. I'm not moderate. So I mean, I get along with everyone. I was fine at the school. I left because it was time for me to go. But I looked and I said, if I put my son into a good school, which is what you would want, if you're going to put him in a public school, you want to put him in a good school, he will look around the school and see no one teaching him who looks like him.
Yes.
None. And, that has several implications. I mean, beyond just looking and going, you need role models to see what you can be. If he doesn't have any African American teachers or male African American teachers, it'll be hard to tell him that he can be an African American teacher. Yeah. And if these women don't have in their minds, because most of them are white women, if they don't have in their minds that my son needs to see that in examples, then they're not going to put forth examples to him to say, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a musician, you can be an art, you can be anything you want to be. Let me make sure you see these images, that you see these people, that they exist and they're like you. He needs to see that now. He doesn't need to wait till he's in middle school and high school to see that. He needs to see that today. And even though he's blessed to have a father as an example, he needs to see a multitude of examples outside to know we're not unusual. It's not just the families on Blackish. Like we're all over. You just need to find us. We're here. So not just that, and then there's also, whether we like it or not, there is that reality that I don't know what's in her mind. The teacher who goes into that class. And I hate to be like that, but I mean, I don't. And if I don't trust some of my colleagues 100%, like if something weird they say, it's like, it didn't shock me because some of them like, I could have seen that coming. I could see that you would say that in the break room. I could see that coming. Do I want my son in your hands? Because like we've already said, you have more hours than I do. Mm-hmm. I need him to be with someone who truly, genuinely cares, believes in him. Who better than his mom and his dad? Yeah. And the teacher may be okay, but then again, she may not. And I'm not really willing to risk that.
And I guess, my kids are they're in a Catholic school, but the Catholic schools here are part of the public school system. But, it's that constant, every year you're questioning, who's my kid's teacher going to be this year? Are they going to be okay? Are they going to have any biases? And it's like the same thing every year. So you get a teacher and they're great and it's lovely. And then the next year rolls around, it starts all over again. So yeah, I completely see that value in having control over what your kids are learning, how they're learning it, and who they're learning it from. Yeah. So we talked about all that, and I see that as all the positives. What are some of the challenges? So, I don't know, tell me, like, on your worst day, what does homeschooling look like on your worst day?
My worst day usually begins with, I don't want to homeschool anymore, Mommy. I want to go to regular school with everybody else, and I want to do what everybody else is doing. And like I said, I'm not necessarily the sit down on the floor and play Legos type, so I go to the public school website and I say, okay, these are the test scores for the schools that you're zoned for. You pick out the one that you're going to go to, and then we'll talk. And they're like, oh.
You ground them back in fact.
Right. I don't have because at the school that they would be zoned for, they are 99% black, and 6% of the students in that school are meet or exceed expectations.
Oh, no.
6%.
Wow.
So my kids have learned fractions and percents already, and they know that means, 94% of those kids are not going to, I said, who are you going to talk to?
Yeah.
Because you say you want friends. Who are you about to be friends with?
But,
can we talk about that?
Yeah.
So we spend about half the day on my worst day convincing them that homeschool is kind of okay, and then we go on a field trip and it's all good. So it just kind of balances that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, I think my worst days really, like I said, with every parent. For me, it's patience, and I'm be real. Some days I don't have it. Some days I'm just like, look, y'all need to stop. You guys need to sit down. Please sit down. Please just you know what? We don't really not supposed to really do a lot of screen time. I'm gonna let y'all watch Sesame Street for 5 minutes and just leave me alone for 5 minutes, because I have a younger one too. So I have one who's not schooling at all because he's not old enough, and then I have my son, and then I have my princess, and I don't really do them at the same time. But some days I just wake up and it's like everyone rolled off on the same wrong side of the bed that morning, and it's not like I send you away. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you go away and I go away and we come back and we feel better. You're looking at me, and with him, my son, it starts with, I don't want that cereal. See, wait. See, wait. We're not, I have to send him back to his room and go get in the bed and get out of the bed and try to get it.
Yes. Yeah.
So once we get that with the I don't want that cereal, it's usually downhill for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's tough.
It always starts with, they want something that you cannot give them.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you see anything with marshmallows up here? No. Eat what we have.
How long? So Eva, I mean, you've already kind of reached that success. Like, your son's off to college, and you've got 2 more now. Do you anticipate homeschooling them until they're off to college as well?
It depends. I can't say that I didn't attempt to get the oldest back into school, because I believe that once you get to a certain age, you really shouldn't be around your parents that long. It's there's so many different things that I never want to hear, know about, see. At this age, at 10, 11, 12, you want to know everything. At 13 through 17, you don't want to know most of that. It's like, are you safe? Have you eaten? Okay, cool. And that's the end of that. So, we made a couple of attempts to get him back out. But, college ended up being his exit. So the youngest, we're still thinking about it. But it seems like every single time we get close to thinking about what, moving on and what we're going to do, something insane happens with DC schools. And, we have to either consider moving or something like that, because in our area, like I was saying, the 6%, that's just, the school that we would be zoned for, but it's only 30% meeting or exceeding overall. So it's not like this area, even though it is supposed to be the capital of the free world, they don't have a lot of options if you're not going to spend $60,000 to send your kid to school. And if they don't leave 8th grade with a degree in something, I'm not paying that much for them to go to school. So for right now, they're going to be with me for quite some time.
That, I just want to, this is slightly off topic, but I just want to touch on that 6%, because to me, I mean, you've got 6% of the kids who are meeting or exceeding expectations. That's not a problem with the kids. Kids are kids, right? Kids can be taught, kids will learn. That's a problem there's with the school, with the teachers. I mean, what's going on? As an outsider, like, can you explain to me, Yolanda, maybe as a teacher, you're best placed to answer this, but what's going on in the schools that you would get a number like 6% who are meeting or exceeding expectations?
Well, with me, when you look at that number, before you even look at that number, you have to question, what are they measuring? Who set that bar?
Right.
When was that bar set? And why was that bar set? So a lot of times when we look at that and we go, well, they're meeting or exceeding expectations. Sometimes if you look at the standards, people hate to say that, Common Core standards or whatever standards in your area happen to be. If you look at them, you have to look from the bottom to the top and see if they're preparing the kids for what they expect them to do later on. When did they start preparing them for it? Most of the time, these kids are asked to do in middle school and high school levels things that they were not prepared to do earlier. And some of those bars and what they are measuring, I'm a teacher, so someone can quote me on it if they want. It's completely arbitrary. Mm-hmm. They have no connection to anything reality-based that the kids will need or use depending on what they want to do with their life. So a lot of times when you look at it, when I say it's a systemic problem, I'm not really interested in that bar being used to measure my son, you know? And when we look at the 6%, even if you look at the teachers who are in there, who are trying their best to get the kids there, first you have a lot of teachers who are underprepared to be in the positions that they're in. Some of them who are prepared and want to, but if you ever stop and ask one of those teachers, one of those good teachers, you know, like you say, oh, I get this teacher and I look at them and I talk to them and they're awesome. And you get them towards the end of the year and you ask them, okay, how much of the time as a teacher did you get to spend actually legitimately opening the minds of the kids and doing what it is that you love to do? Most of the teachers are not teachers. We're paper pushers. We're dealing with so much more. It's really 70% of our job has nothing to do with the actual education of the kids in the class. You know, and you can't ask them to do that job if you're not going to support them as a system and prepare them and then give them what they need on a day-to-day basis. And the system does not. It does not set the teachers up to do their job. Therefore, the teachers can't help the kids get what they need.
And there's a lot of turnover in the school over here.
And
there's
a
lot
reason
of turnover because they come in bright-eyed and they're ready to help a failing school, and they get in there and they realize that there's a whole lot of politics, and the kids just kind of get mashed up in that. So when so they do testing at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, and I said 6% because that was the English and language arts ELA, but the math was 2%.
Oh my God.
And, you know, I went with, I told the kids the English one because I don't think, you know, math is something that it's pretty standard. There's not really any, there's not too many different ways you can get around. Math is kind of what it is.
Stuff,
But, you know, English, I don't know if it's grammar. I didn't know if it was reading. I don't know what it is. But one of my, I just finished law school, and one of my classmates was teaching over here, and she was doing a reading program, and she said that they don't have a reading class. I was like, how is it possible that they don't have a reading class in elementary school? Like, it's not they're teaching all the other subjects that require reading, but they don't teach them how to read.
Nope.
So when you say that it's systemic, it's systemic from two sides. The curriculum that they're giving them doesn't prepare them, like you were saying, to actually do anything. you can teach them all about what's in the books, but if they need to go back and study it and they can't read it, that's not helpful. Yeah. But then you have the teachers that are, just trying to get everything in on time.
Yeah.
And prepare these kids for these standardized tests so that they can keep their funding or their jobs or whatever they have to keep.
Their jobs. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Wow. It makes that decision to homeschool all the more easier.
But you do realize still, I was like, but I'm still trying to figure out how to get them in there.
But you know what, honestly, if for me with how long my kids are going to be with me, there are some schools that I will look at, like they'll come across your Facebook page or whatever, and usually, honestly, they're like mostly African American run schools with the kids, and I'll look at them and I'll tell my husband, like, if that was here and my son could go there, I'd be okay. So it's not, when I say I'm not anti-public school, I'm not anti-school, institutions at all. I'm an educator. I love education in any form that works. But that's not here. I live in a small town that has cows on our block. Okay? We moved to the town for a reason, but I mean, that the structure that would be necessary to carry my son and build in him to know the presence of who and what he is before the outside world tells him who and what they want him to be.
That's right.
It's not here. So for now, he's with us. And then when he gets older and he starts getting interested in things that I can't teach him, because I cannot teach every subject. I already know that. I have no problem finding the means and the ways to outsource him to find what he needs so that he can learn whatever it is he wants.
I thank you guys, both of you. I love the way you've ended that and on that positive note, and you're both so inspirational and amazing mothers. You make me want to go pick up my kids and just be like,
really tired moms.
Well, yeah. If you enjoy listening to the show, be sure to subscribe so you get automatic updates of new episodes every Tuesday. Don't forget to follow Woke Mommy Chatter on Twitter at @WokeMommy, on Instagram, and follow along on Facebook at Woke Mommy Chatter. If you'd like to get in touch, have feedback, ideas for the show, drop me a line at wokemommychatter@gmail.com.